Welcome to the Political Trenches, local government at work. We're back in the trenches looking at the stories and issues that are shaping municipalities from coast to coast to coast. And today we are continuing our dive into the role of the CAO. We are honored to be joined later on in the episode by David Barrick, an experienced leader who has led a municipal administration in both an urban and a rural setting. But as always, Ian and I have three stories that we'll be watching and diving into today, including a town council that is being slapped on the hand for holding two council meetings over email. A business group in Banff is asking the Banff Council to hold the tax increase this year to under 3%. And finally, what's the price of a town's name? Ian, how has your last 2 weeks been?
It's we're now coming down off the hectic nature of council orientations in Alberta, although they're still happening on the East Coast in Newfoundland, and Labrador. So that's been busy there. It's been kind of nice actually to be able to take a bit of a breath and do a lot of catch up over the last little while.
Our first story comes from Aurelia Matters. Ontario's ombudsman has found the township of Ramara violated open meeting rules after council members conducted township business through group emails. In the report released by the Ontario Ombudsman, it was determined that two email exchange among a quorum of the Council Committee of the Whole in October of 2024 constituted electronic meetings under the Municipal Act. One of the emails sent on October 23rd, 2024, was found to have directly influenced the committee's decision to remove the food cycler program from the township's budget, a move that advanced municipal business outside a formal public meeting. The investigation, conducted with the township's full cooperation, reviewed emails, meeting minutes, and recordings, concluding that the discussions had breached the province's open meeting requirements. Now, the report recommended new measures to prevent similar incidents, including staff training, stricter email protocols, and updates to the township's code of conduct. Council accepted the recommendations at its October 2025 meeting. The mayor of the township downplayed the need for an apology, but emphasized the importance of handling information transparently through official channels. Now, he advised councillors to forward all correspondence through the clerk's office to avoid replying to all members on public matters. Now, the Ombudsman's report serves as a reminder to municipalities that digital communication, including emails, can constitute a meeting if it involves a quorum and materially advances decision making. Now, Ian, how can municipalities adapt their communication practices to ensure transparency and accountability in the age of digital communication?
It's something that is certainly can be a bit of a trap, particularly for new councils. You've mentioned the word transparency quite a lot. There were comments in the article itself about transparency. We'll find though that the concept comes into conflict a little bit with expediency, the desire to get things done fairly quickly. And so when you put the two of those together, one of them is going to prevail, and this might be one of these times where transparency kind of went out the window. When I looked through their strategic plan from 2023, so this council's term, they said they want to act, quote, through transparent and accountable decision making. So they have the transparent part has certainly stopped in this case. And to me, it's a little bit mind-boggling that this is a council that is 2 years into their council term at the time that this was said to have occurred. And it's fundamental to the practice of good governance that public business is transacted in public. Not that the public gets to participate necessarily, but they do get to see it. And with a population of about 10,000 people in this township, it's not a small place. So they should have known better than to do this in the first place. They should have been warned by their chief elected official, by their chief administrative officer, or legislative officer, and heeded that warning as well, which does seem to be part of where this whole process broke down.
Over the time that I've done my show, the Cross-Border Interviews in Municipal Affairs, and even through conversations that I've had at conventions, I often hear the fact that people go out to grab drinks after their council meetings. How important is it to have that sort of, and I hate to use this phrase, but that wall between what is discussed at those informal settings, because when you go out for even council training sessions, there is a quorum of council there, so there could be decisions made. How important is it to separate what you're talking about with what the position, what the context of where you're meeting the people are?
I think it's very important. One of the biggest things that differentiates local government in Canada from the provincial and federal governments is the lack of caucus or cabinet confidentiality or solidarity. So we are expected in local government to conduct our business in public, whereas many citizens see what's going on federally and provincially and realize that meetings themselves, whether it's legislature and the House of Commons, is sometimes performative, that we vote along party lines. In this case, of course, that's not the case in local government. You made a reference to when people are gathered, when a quorum is gathered, so more than half of the council. If they want to get together and talk about last night's hockey score or about last week's council meeting, no problem. That's not a big deal at all. If they want to talk about what big ideas they had as part of their platforms, that's okay too. But once they start, and this was a reference in the article as well, to materially advance an issue towards a decision outside of the public realm, that's when we're falling into problems. And this is a council that either knew or ought to have known that this was something that they ought not to be doing. So the lack of knowledge in this case is problematic. It's one of the biggest topics that we emphasize in council orientations for new councils, for returning councillors, because it's one of the biggest places we see conflict generating or information getting out into public or complaints being lodged against councils and council members. So it is a huge problem, whether it's done at the local coffee shop or at the coffee shop in the same city that the convention that you referenced is taking place in.
Whenever I get a peek behind the curtain, I always think about how the sausage is made and how the
Yep.
policies are developed. What steps should councils take to balance efficiency? Because sometimes, and you hear it all the time from candidates, municipal local government is the slowest level of government. It takes the longest to advance anything. How do you balance, and how does should a council balance efficiency in decision making with the public's right to open and accessible government discussions that are taking place around that council table or between members of council?
If there's a seesaw and you're going to put on one end efficiency, expediency, and on the other end, respect for information, confidentiality, that transparency. To me, the principles of the latter ought to prevail because governance being done well. The other parts are about the results of that or the outcomes of that. And if a council is able to follow good decision-making principles, some of which are about good decision-making, the primacy of the council table, all of those sorts of things, the outcomes eventually will be better for the people who live there. And I will take a little bit of exception to your first comment about local government being slowest. It's not. I think of all the orders of government in Canada, an elected official is most likely to see change in their lifetime or their council lifetime at the local government end of things rather than at the provincial or federal orders of government. So I actually think in terms of government, it's the fastest moving snail that we have.
Well, maybe we should tell some of the candidates who were just elected to municipal office here in the province of Alberta that is
Well,
the case, because that is often what I hear.
let me just wrap this thing up by just saying I highly doubt that it's just this township of Ramara that's got the problem. That this is a problem across the country and we run into it all the time. So while Ramara here made the news, it's not unique to them.
And I would completely agree to that sentiment, because I know for a fact, and I'm not naming names right now, but I know for a fact that there are many councils out there that have Telegram group chats, they have social media group chats with everyone where they discuss things in a private, but I'm not sure if they're making motions or they're advancing anything, so I can't do anything about that. But I know for a fact that there are others who are doing maybe not be council meetings, but they do have that sort of group chat that is ongoing. So there's my
Yeah.
little rant there. Let's return to our second story before I might potentially get sued by the said municipalities. Our second story comes from the Rocky Mountain Outlook. The Banff and Lake Louise Hospitality Association, or BLLHA, is urging Banff Town Council to limit the municipal tax increase for 2026 to no more than 3%. aligning it with the Alberta's projected 2025 consumer price index of 2.5 to 3%. Now, the business group argues that any increase beyond this threshold should come from alternative sources, such as visitor pay parking revenues or external grants, rather than additional taxes on residents and businesses. Now, the organization also recommends expanding the upcoming service review for the town of Banff to include clearer performance measures across departments to ensure spending reflects value for money and measurable outcomes. Now, the current 2026 draft budget proposed an 8.48% tax increase. Now, this tax increase was approved by the previous council before the election, which includes funding for inflation, growth, and previously approved service expansions. Town officials noted that part of the increase stems from restoring $900,000 in reserve funding cut during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, to ease the tax burden, council is considering using more visitor pay parking revenue to fully fund Banff's Rome public transit system, potentially through higher or dynamic parking fees. However, administration cautioned the provincial infrastructure grants have been reduced, leaving the town to rely more heavily on local funding resources, despite Banff hosting nearly half of Alberta's international visitors. Now, Ian, how can council strike a balance between maintaining essential community services and ensuring tax increases remain affordable for residents and businesses given the current economic pressures and reduction in provincial funding?
It's complicated, of course. There's never enough resources to do the work that everybody wants to do. And the referenced pieces here, the parking fees or the business taxes, are two of the three levers that or budget or areas of income that a municipality has. Of course, it's got transfers from other orders of government, grants. It's got the fees and charges, parking, for example, and then it's got property taxes. And in this case, there's the business taxes as well. So they are all contributing to the revenue for the town of Banff in this case. The council has decided or will decide the total amount of revenue they need, and then they have to figure out how to divide up where they're going to get that money from. So what this business group is saying is rather than taking it from one area of fees and charges, we take it from another area of fees and charges, parking, which somehow seems like a victimless crime because it's user pay. So in this case, to me, it's about priorities. Is the town looking after its core business? Is it doing things, extra things maybe that it ought to do? What the business group is suggesting is certainly a legitimate source of revenue and action, particularly, I suspect, for a tourist town where so much of the revenue that comes from the people who live there comes from transient people who are there seasonally only. And I also think, too, that they're talking in terms of percentages, 3% in this case. To me, I think that's looking at the wrong end of the budget. The tax rate is the outcome. It's not the input. So deciding what the costs are going to be or what level of service is going to be provided dictates what sort of revenue is needed. Looking at it afterwards, then we decide whether that's 3% or 5% or 8% and whether that's tolerable. And then we have to work our way back from this. So I think what the town of Banff is up against is something that a lot of municipalities are up against. They are just much more high profile just because of where they are, the nature of the town, and all of those sorts of things.
So the reason I wanted to talk about this story, because there's often something we forget about when it comes to property taxes. Now, I will go talk to 100 different people right now, and I guarantee you everyone will say we want to keep our taxes low. 8% seems high to them. 3% may be reasonable. But that's 3% just for the municipal portion of the property taxes. And this is the part that we often forget to talk about. Now, 8% is just for the municipal portion, and then the education portion of the property taxes, which the province dictates, gets added onto that property tax. So when the business association says they want to keep taxes low, great. But are you also saying that to the province? Are you also saying that to the senior requisition, the education requisition that goes on your property taxes? Because the last time property taxes went out, which was in 2025, most people were in for a sticker shock when they saw it wasn't the announced property tax increase that the municipality had put out. It was also increased because of the school portion and the seniors portion. So while I will agree that maybe we need to try and keep our taxes low, we need to also remember that there are many different factions to the property taxes that we have to continue to look after, because we cannot just assume that what you get on your property tax invoice in June or May, or whenever you get it, is just the municipality's portion, because the province takes a big chunk of that. So I agree that property taxes may need to be stay low. I agree that we might need to talk about 8.48% as being too high. But then I also go back to look at the town of Osoyoos, British Columbia, where they went and they said 39% and then they rolled it back. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. I think this is a good way. They presented to council as they should. They didn't just write an open letter to the town council meeting. They did it in the appropriate manner. Hopefully, this new council will, as they are about to go into budget talks right now, or if they haven't already, start looking at potential ways that they can reduce services or change the way that they tax people. So it's a multifaceted approach that they have to look at, and the town of Banff is going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place, because they're the place where people come to in Canada. It's not like they're going, and I'm not, please do not think that I'm attacking any community right now. They're not going to Acme, Alberta to go for their tourist destination. They're going to Banff. So as we are seeing more influx of domestic tourism, maybe the town of Banff should be allowed to increase their parking fees to offset some of that, because well, how else are they going to pay for things? So there's my
Before we
little
go
rant.
on this one, I got a closing comment on this one too. Whether the money comes from a tax like this, whether it comes from a property tax, whether it comes from a government grant, or whether it comes from a parking meter, ultimately there's one taxpayer.
Mhm.
So all it is doing is moving money from one pocket to the other pocket and then off to the town of Banff. So at the end, there really is no difference to you and me, because we are providing part of the provincial grant. People who live in or work in, have businesses in Banff are providing grant through their taxes and fees as well. So one taxpayer.
Speaking of money, let's move to our third story. And before we do that, I have to ask you a very simple question, since we're just moving money between each other right now. Ian, do you have an extra $10 million you can lend me for a potential investment opportunity for the Ian McCormick town?
Oh, that's a great idea. I've got like $40, maybe, if you can spot me the rest.
Okay, so our last story comes from CTV Saskatchewan. The town of Duck Lake, Saskatchewan is making national headlines by offering to sell its naming rights, a move believed to be the first of its kind in Canada. Now, the town of roughly 600 residents in Saskatchewan is inviting corporations to bid at least $10 million for the opportunity to rename the entire community. Mayor Jason Anderson says the idea, inspired by U.S. stadium naming deals, aims to raise funds for vital infrastructure upgrades, including road improvements. Anderson points to Duck Lake's high visibility along Highway 11, emphasizing that a corporate name would appear on GPS systems, maps, signage, and even weather reports worldwide, proving global exposure for any potential buyer. While some residents welcome the idea as a creative way to boost local investment and attention, others are uneasy about losing the town's historic identity. The proposal has sparked debate over the balance between economic opportunity and preserving local heritage. Bids are now open until March 31st, with residents set to vote on the plan in April. Now, according to the provincial government, any name change would still require ministerial approval, though current legislation places no restrictions on what a municipality name can be chosen. So, Ian, very simple off the cuff question, but it is one that I had to write down because I want to make sure I got it right. If we're selling name rights to town, should we also start auctioning off street names like Main Street, presented by Netflix?
Chris Brown Avenue, I can see it now.
There you go. Is this an interesting financial move, or is this just a marketing ploy?
Well, it's definitely a good way of getting attention. We're talking about it, made the media. Maybe raises some awareness, generates some curiosity, but to me, that's kind of about it. it's perhaps a bit of a flash in the pan. This is, I mean, if this does come to pass, to me, it's a bit of short-term gain for long-term pain. The officials mentioned what they wanted to use the money for was a lot of infrastructure renewal. The systemic problem is going to continue to exist, even if that infrastructure gets renewed now. They're going to be facing the same problem a few years down the road. And a year or two from now, there's going to be different kinds of infrastructure that need replacing. And they can't resell the town name at that point unless there's some sort of an expiry to it. So the same problem is going to reemerge. Specifically, though, to this town, I've been to Duck Lake. The town is 600 people, is not sustainable on its own. Then maybe there's a bigger and more sobering conversation that needs to happen. And it's a very historic place in terms of Canadian history, with the in terms with Métis and the Northwest Rebellion. So moving the name Duck Lake, I think, would have an impact on Canadian history as well as an impact on what is going on in the town. I don't know if it's a non-starter, but it's certainly not something that I think ought to go very far.
Well, if it does go far, maybe we can start calling it the town formerly known as Duck Lake, and we'll go from there. But we will be back right after this quick message with our interview with CAO David Barrick. David Barrick brings extensive experience in municipal leadership, including serving as CAO for the city of Brampton, most recently CAO for the municipality of Thames Centre, and is also beginning his new career on January 1st, 2026, as CAO for the township of South Stormont. David previously served as an elected official with the city of Port Colborne and the regional municipality of Niagara, giving him practical understanding of community priorities and governance. David, welcome to the show.
Chris, Ian, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
So my very first question, and it's a question that we ask all CAOs who've come on the show. How would you describe the role of Chief Administrative Officer?
Well, thanks, Chris. Really, the role of CAO is a bridge position between the political realm, that is directly elected officials on council, and the administrative day-to-day operations side as well for staff. So the CAO role really bridges those two worlds. There's a lot of policies. There's municipal legislation, provincially that is, and bylaws, et cetera, that really clearly delineate and define roles, responsibilities, code of conduct, et cetera, to clarify those roles and positions where the CAO really, working in partnership with the mayor, is that bridge position to ensure that, one, the people through their elected representatives are going in a direction that is consistent with the themes of what people got elected to do. And secondly, that staff are following council oversight and direction, including either policies or functions and service levels, et cetera. So the CAO kind of sits in the middle of that, straddles both sides. So really has to have a level of political acuity dealing with members of council, as well as ask the right questions of all the subject matter experts that are there. So knowing what questions to ask and sometimes translate it to a broader public audience. So it is an interesting and unique role in government.
I'll jump in now too. We're in the middle of a series about different kinds of CAOs across the country. And we wanted to talk to you because you've got experience both in the rural CAO world and in the urban CAO world. And given that experience, how would you categorize the differences or requirements between being a CAO for a city and being a CAO for a rural municipality?
Well, that's great. Thanks, Ian. Some of the issues are the same with respect to scale. So you can have staff of 60 or a staff of 6,000. And the municipalities you referenced, that's about the scale of each. And but the policies are the same. The bylaws are the same. The legislation is the same. The budget is also larger, right? Over $1 billion annual budget or a budget of 30 million. So there's more zeros on the end of the dollars and there's more zeros on the end of number of staff, but there are a lot of similarities with respect to the role itself. And there are some nuances though. There's some issues from an urban perspective that you wouldn't necessarily deal with in a rural environment, such as transit, homelessness, housing. Community safety is more of an issue. Usually much more diverse population. So City of Brampton has over 170 languages in our community. So we made sure communications products were done in the top 10 languages as examples. And then rural municipalities usually have more challenges with respect to resource allocation. They deal with matters like ditching and drainage that maybe you won't find in an urban municipality. So the issues may be different, but there are also a lot of similarities. So the role of the CAO can be scalable. If a good CAO is a good CAO, you could put that individual in a larger or smaller municipality.
So I'd like to explore that just a little bit if I can. And that is you moved from one to another, and you've moved two, three times. You've also got experience, of course, with on the other side of the council bench as well. Are there, do you think, particular aptitudes that are better suited for urban versus rural? And how do you make the transition between the two?
So thanks. There are some different aptitudes that probably um, are more appreciated in one environment than the other. In an urban environment, you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, I would say, a much higher pace, more adversarial debates. You've got a lot of constituents putting pressure on their local officials, and it's usually more diverse opinions, so that creates more adversarial debates. More intense public and media scrutiny, just again, number of people, number of resources, people watching want to go in different directions. And being, as I mentioned earlier, at ease dealing with technical experts on a wide range of with a wide range of advocacy groups and stakeholders as well. In a rural community, my sense is you have to be genuinely accessible and visible to the public, versus being accessible to members of council and staff. You also need to be accessible and visible to the members of public in a rural area. You'll see residents at the local grocery store in Arena talking about the council decision recently. So humility, patience, and a willingness to really roll up your sleeves and get to work are critical because you're much closer to operations in a rural area.
Okay, sure. You've worked in a variety of different places. When you start with a new municipality, working in a new community, how do you gain the trust of the staff once you first come in as the new face?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Look, every time there's a change, there's some trepidation. A new council comes in, people are cautious and worried. And when a new CAO comes in, the same thing. It's human nature. So understanding that, for me, it's always the first rule of leadership is to listen. So I do a lot of listening up front. A list because um, some people are hesitant to talk or speak up unless you're soliciting that, right? And then demonstrating that you've listened by implementing some of the things that you heard quickly. So do a lot of listening, find out kind of pinch points, pain points are, and any quick wins that you can do to demonstrate that yes, you've listened, you heard, and you've helped make things better early. Really helps gain that trust and respect and like, hey, this person's just here to help. So there's no hidden agenda. It's we all have a job to do. We have to support council. I'm here to support you. So it's like your success is my success, your failure is my failure. We have to support each other.
Good. I've heard a lot of CAOs say it can be quite a lonely role because there's lots of people you can't talk to about things. Do you have a peer network, or you mentioned CAMA earlier, or the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association? Do you have groups of people that you can turn to for advice or just as a catharsis?
Yeah, for sure. So usually your neighboring CAOs are a good start. And there's usually, regional CAO groups or county groups. So I would encourage, speaking with your neighboring municipal CAOs is good. And as well, yes, there's other regional groups and provincial ones you referenced. I know there's in other provinces, they all have them. Those are excellent, excellent formats. I know in the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association, there's fall workshop and a spring workshop every year where, hundreds of CAOs gather, pretty well just themselves to be able to speak freely about issues, which is really good support. So, and CAMA does the same thing nationally, which I would highly recommend both.
So I want to turn to the role and how the role of CAO for a large city like Brampton, just in your case, in a small municipality or rural municipality can differ. Now, I've chatted with some CAOs in my time and even on this show where the role of a small town mayor or a rural CAO, I mean, sometimes feel like a jack of all trades and a master of none. In a big city setting, you have many directors, many senior managements who you can rely on to have that experience. But in a small rural setting, you don't often get that. How does that affect the way you look at the role in a small rural setting compared to a big city setting? Because when you go to council, I can imagine every single council member is going to ask you questions that you're just going to have to say, I'm going to have to get back to you. Where in a big city setting, you go, well, the director of operations, who's an engineer by trade, can answer that question. How do you see that role affecting how the CAO is perceived in a rural setting compared to a big city setting?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's a great question. You've accurately articulated this scenario, simply based on resources, right? So in a larger municipality, you have that greater degree of technical expertise, so that yes, if that staff person's in the audience, we can probably answer any question that a member of council has on the spot. In a smaller municipality, like, look, the person who clears the roads in a snow plow in the winter is the same person who's, collecting garbage. Like, there's a crossover of responsibilities in terms of being more generalists are required in a rural municipality, where there's more highly technical folks. Now, it speaks to the relationship piece, right? So I call it the no surprise rule. If you've got a good relationship with members of council, you're not going to be surprised to say, I'm going to get back to you. They may give you a heads up and say, hey, I read this report, I'm going to ask these questions, so be ready. And vice versa, where staff aren't surprising members of council. So as an organization, the organization doesn't look like it's disconnected. And having to say, I'm going to get back to you too many times doesn't really bode well, like as an organization. So that's the importance of the relationship there. And again, having generalists provides a greater flexibility and sometimes greater use of existing resources, which is a benefit. My sense is rural municipalities get more done with less than urban municipalities sometimes take for granted the resources that are at their disposal. Let me give you an example. 1% on the tax levy in a large municipality may be $3 or $4 million. 1% in a rural municipality might be $90,000. So there's really a lot more efficiency lens applied to rural municipalities that can get more value for the dollar, in my experience and opinion.
Government relations is a top priority for any CAO. You need to have a good working relationship with not only your council, but your local member of provincial parliament, even your MP, because you're going to be in contact with them probably a little bit more than your mayor or council will be. Now, I'm going to broadly stroke this question, so I apologize for the Premier of Ontario for asking this question, but sometimes when provincial governments put in policies with that sort of work for municipalities or work against municipalities, they look at a big picture approach to policy. They look at the big cities, the city of Toronto, Brampton, Mississauga, all the big cities. But that means the smaller rural municipalities often follow under the same brush, and they have to sort of figure out how they have to mandate their policies around what the provincial priorities are. How do you see your role as CAO in a rural setting in ensuring what the province dictates is applicable but is done in a smaller rural setting?
Yeah, so that relationship with your local MPP is really important, because that's the person who delivers the message to Queen's Park, really on the municipality's behalf. I'm going to give you a couple quick examples. One is OPP billing, so Ontario Provincial Police, their contract service to rural municipalities here. And the municipalities who contract that service, they just get the bill. There's no negotiating. It's like, if you want the OPP, you can have us, but here's your bill. There's no going through a list of services and cherry picking. It's all or nothing, which is fine. The OPP are great partners, by the way. But the billing model, the province led the negotiations for their collective agreement. They were behind a couple of years, so the province had to pay a retroactive payment, which means then the municipalities did. It resulted in 20-25% bill hike in 1 year, 3-4% levy impact on rural municipalities, and that's before talking about hydro or any other natural increases. So there, the province missed the mark. We advocated and we said, look, no taxation without representation, so to speak. You need to have municipal representation on the bargaining group, because we're the ones holding the bag and paying the bill. And Chris, they listened. So being able to communicate and address these things kind of moving forward, yeah, they do the broad brush strokes, but they also will listen. It's important that the message is delivered and they will hear it.
So our final question for you, David, and it's the important one because we often ask this to all our guests. Now, your career in chief for public administration is long. What's the advice that you'd give that first time CAO who's about to join the ranks alongside you in a small rural setting or a big city setting that would help them make their career as a CAO as profitable and as extensive as yours has been?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I have recommended some of the training and education that we talked about earlier today, like the OMAA program and the CAMA program. Those are pretty good. Um, Having more than one portfolio is helpful. So if you're in corporate services, maybe try community services, or if you're public works, try corporate, like try more than one portfolio if possible, like as a director or commissioner first. I myself had multiple portfolios before I became a CAO, and it only helped me in that role. Um, so I would advise that. The other thing is, by virtue of these roles, uh, there may be 5-year lifespans. So don't anticipate coming into a CAO position and being there for 20 years. I mean, if you do, great, and if you want to, great. But CAOs increasingly are higher turnover than other positions. In fact, there was a study done recently here in Ontario. I think the average is 4.4 years. Every 4.4 years, a CAO is rotating to another municipality or somewhere else. So if you have to be ready for that, and I know that's why there's a lot of folks in the CAO roles that are at or near the end of their retirement, and it's increasingly difficult to recruit younger CAOs. So that's unfortunate. I would like to see younger CAOs. I've been a young CAO for a long time. I look around the room. I'm still the youngest CAO around. I would like to see people behind me, coming into these roles because they're very rewarding, as I said. But those are some things to be mindful of.
Well, David, I want to thank you from both Ian and myself for sitting down over the last few minutes and chatting about the role of CAO when it comes to both urban and rural. I feel like we've gained a lot of insight. So thank you so much and best of luck on January 1st as you enter into again, back into the CAO's chair. And hopefully you learn as much as you can over the next 2 months, especially where the lights are, so you can turn them on when you walk into that office the first time.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you both for the work that you're doing as well.
Thanks, David.
Our full interview with David will be airing next Wednesday. We'll be right back after this quick message. In the heart of every thriving community lies a well-crafted strategic plan. But crafting such a plan requires expertise, experience, and a deep understanding of local needs. Enter Strategic Steps, your partner in municipal strategic planning. Strategic Steps' team of experts have years of experience in municipal administration. At Strategic Steps, they just don't develop plans. They co-create homegrown strategies tailored to your unique community. They listen, they collaborate, they empower your community to thrive. Contact Strategic Steps today and take the first step towards a brighter future for your municipality. Call Strategic Steps at 780-416-9255 or visit strategicsteps.ca to get started. Ian, rural versus urban municipalities and how the role of the CAO is affected by that. How do you think today's episode with David went and our top 3 stories of the week?
I think David really illustrated that it's not actually urban versus rural. It's slightly different nuances on the same sort of thing. He was talking about the core aptitudes being very similar, but then some of the specialized aptitudes being somewhat different. So I don't see it in conflict at all. And I think it was a really good illustration of more about how we flesh out the role of the CAO in this series that we're doing at the moment.
And at the end of the day, I think the first few minutes you talked about, it all comes down to the zeros after the number. So it honestly always comes down to money, even this big. So we are going to be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode. But between now and then, what do you have on the plans for Strategic Steps? And what do you, for yourself, have planned?
Yeah, nothing terribly exciting, actually. We got some more governance work to do in Alberta, a little bit in Labrador and Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, all kind of all over the country. We're also prepping a little bit for some conferences that are coming up as well, in terms of some speaking and presenting at those as well. So those are always a fun time to engage with some people I haven't met before.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, this episode airs. I'll be heading off to the Alberta Municipalities Convention here in Calgary, and then I'm off to Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador for the MNL 75th anniversary, and then I'm back for one day, and then I'm off to Winnipeg for the AMM convention. So it is going to be a fun 2 weeks. So we will be back in 2 weeks' time with another great episode of the Political Trenches Local Government at Work, another great interview with another CIO. Ian, always a pleasure to be in the trenches with you.
Same with you. See you then.